Welcome to Curito Connects. I'm your host, Jenn, and I've been conversing with friends around the world about life challenges and impactful moments. Conversations on this platform look at answering the questions, how we overcome challenges and how our experiences shape who we are and the work we do today. I hope this work can inspire you on your own personal and individual journey. Let's dive right in. Hello, my guest today is Lara Veronin, a Taiwanese American singer-songwriter and entrepreneur who is famously known for her lead singing role with a Taiwanese band Nan Quan Mama and her duet with Jay Chou, Coral C, called San Hu Hai. Hi, Lara.
Hi, Jenn. Does it feel weird to be saying hi because it's so official?
I know, right? But this is official because we're doing this recording.
This is true.
Yeah.
We are immortalizing our conversation forever in the histories of the internet.
Yes, but it's going to be a good one. Let me continue with my introduction for you before we jump into the conversation.
Yeah. Tell me more, Jenn.
All right, give me a second here. So Lara is another high school friend of mine from our days at the American School here in Taipei. She has always stood out to me with her sweet personality and talented vocals. We actually didn't reconnect until I had moved back to Taiwan. And through her invitation, I got to decorate for the 2015 Mr. Gay Taiwan pageant down in Kaohsiung. Lara and her sister Esther's multimedia company, Meimeiwawa, has been a strong advocate for the Taiwan LGBTQ community over the years. Having began her entertainment career at the young age of 16, not even fresh out of high school, she has had her fair share of industry and personal struggles. And throughout her career, she has been outspoken about the mental health topic as well. So a fun side note, in 2018, the year Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper starred in A Star is Born, she and her sister produced and directed a similar narrative, Tomorrow's Star. Lara and I continue to connect once a year for our yearly catch-up to see how we are doing personally and professionally and on mental health topics, as always. And it's been something we have wanted to bring more of an awareness to. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Lara to the mic.
Hello again. It feels very official now. Thank you, Jenn, for letting me have this opportunity to come chat and share my experiences.
Well, I'm so honored that we were able to reschedule 5 times.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. This tends to happen not just with this podcast interview, but our hangouts as well, right? Because both of us are pretty active, whether it's with work or social stuff. And we tend to want to do it all. So we're always like, hey, we should get together. And then we keep rescheduling. And then it turns into an annual catch up, even though it didn't start out that way.
That is very true. And, you're sitting in China right now while I'm in Taiwan. So I'm really happy that our annual catch up this year is for the Curito Connects podcast episode.
Yeah, I think technology has made everything super convenient in a way that just like we take for granted, but it really is amazing that like I'm sitting in Beijing and you're in Taipei and we can have this conversation in real time. There's no lag even, fingers crossed.
Exactly. So yeah, let's start. Curito Connects podcast is about challenges and impactful moments for any individual. Who many of the guests who have been through this with me, and we talk about different things, right? And it's really about what has really impacted you and shaped you to become who you are today, and the work you've done. So I mean, again, it's such a broad topic, but I'll let you kind of pick where you want to come in.
Where to start? I don't even know where to start. I guess just at the beginning then, huh?
Let's do it. Let's go to the beginning.
I do think so a little bit of a backstory on me. I've had a very unusual childhood or adolescence, I guess. in that I actually signed with the Taiwanese entertainment industry when I was 15. And then I released my first album with the band when I was 17, still in high school. I remember our press conference was actually the first day of school for senior year. It was like the same day. And I remember just like rushing from school backstage to be like, oh, okay, she's here. Like, she just got out of school. And then like, 10 minutes, because back then it only took 10 minutes to do my makeup. and then getting on stage, like, and doing this press release with like a bunch of reporters. And because it was like back in the day, Jay also attended the press conference to make sure, like, news reporters actually paid attention to us. And it was just, I just remember there being so many cameras that my eyes hurt from like trying to stare at the cameras and, smile. My cheeks hurt. And it was just such a different world that I was stepping into. I think there was a lot, of good experiences as well as a lot of really difficult experiences in my experience, at least. Yeah. So we can get into that later. But I just think, I think it was a very big thing in my life that really shaped who I am and my path.
Were you always going to go into the entertainment industry? Like how did that choice happen, or how did that 因缘, as we call it in Chinese, how did that happen?
How did that happen? Actually, I think ever since I was young, I did enjoy singing, but my sister actually, my sister Esther, who I ended up starting the multimedia company with, she was always like more of the performer, and I was more interested in writing. I think that was always my first career dream, was to be a writer. And so I fell into singing. I think also because I used to be in, this goes into like our TAS background, but I used to be in orchestra, and I was really bad. I was like one of the worst violin players. And like one time somebody was like, oh, like you're pretty good at singing. Why don't you try out for the choir or whatever? And I realized like, oh, I can try out for the choir. And that means that I won't have to carry my violin back and forth every day. And like, that's so much easier. And I kind of got into it that way. And I guess another important experience that I had in terms of deciding to pursue singing more seriously was when I first moved to TAS. And I used to move around a lot, so I was quite shy and quite introverted. And I think there was a talent show in 6th grade, and for some reason I signed up for it. And during the audition, a couple of people had heard me singing. It sounds really, really cheesy now, but it kind of started like a commotion. Like people kept like, oh, have you heard the new girls sing? Like blah, blah, blah. And like people would come up to me in the lunch line and be like, can you sing for me? And I was like looking at this person, like kind of like bewildered, like, well, what do you mean? And they were like, oh, you don't have to use that really nice voice you use, just use your normal voice. And I was like, what are you talking about? But it was this kind of this, my first taste of being like, oh, I think there's something special about the way I sing. And if there is something more to it, then maybe I could take it quite seriously and see how far I can get. And so I think that was the beginning of, being really involved in choir and opus, and then deciding to sign with a manager and kind of explore the potential of an entertainment career. And then one thing led to another, and like 15 years later, I'm still here.
So would you say that it was kind of your TAS experience being in opus and being in the choir that kind of allowed you to see the potential of that path, right? In terms of like going, oh, actually, I can sing, and people do appreciate my voice. And I'm sure there were some great teachers who taught you as well during that time, and other mentors who you had who really, kind of, I guess, could we say, guided you in saying, hey, you could really look into this. Would this be something you'd like to do? Does it excite you?
I definitely think TAS was the first place that I really blossomed, so to speak. Like, especially because in my past, like I mentioned, I used to move like every 6 months. And so I was always constantly like the new kid. And so I was mostly focused on like surviving and not being, not being caught doing something stupid or being made fun of. And so I was really shy. And it was only like at TAS that I kind of felt, I really did have this feeling of being like, oh, I found my tribe, so to speak, because another thing that was kind of difficult growing up was the fact that like my dad is like white American and then my mom is from Taiwan. And so we were always doing kind of a back and forth. Like we would live in the States and then there would be people that wouldn't really understand like my Chinese heritage. And then we'd, be back in Taiwan. Like I remember we moved back here a few years and I would be the only person that looked the way that I did in the whole school. And like I went to a local school in first grade called Li Xin-Guo in Yilan. And so if you can imagine Yilan in like the 90s or whatever, like there's no one who looks like mixed or mixed ethnicity. And there would be like during recess, there'd be fifth graders and sixth graders like standing outside being like, look, there she is, like, and so it was kind of an interesting experience growing up, never quite fitting in with either world. And then when I arrived at TAS, it was like this feeling of like, oh, like I can be both. I can just be me. And there are other people like me that speak both languages and feel most comfortable with both languages and both cultures. And that was a really important thing for me. I think that helped with my confidence. And I think maybe that led to being more able to do performance-based things and more extroverted activities.
Wow. So that earlier years for you really, not so much traumatic, but it was very fundamental in your kind of built of self-confidence. Right. So did you and your sister, because you guys are quite close in age as well, were you kind of helping each other during that time?
Yeah, for sure. Like my sister was my best friend and I seriously relied so heavily on her. I remember one time moving to another new school. And then I think it was like a lunch break or something like that, or recess. Yeah. I guess I have a lot of memories of recess and not of studying. But so we had different recess times. And so I was really surprised to see her on the playground. And I was like, well, what are you doing here? And she was like, oh, our recess got switched because we had an assembly that we had to attend. So like, this is my recess today. And I remember being so overjoyed that day that like, I didn't have to eat lunch by myself, that like I could hang out with her, or like we were really close because we're only a year apart and moving around so much. It kind of, I think it is tough on kids because you have to keep readjusting to your environment and you're not really sure what the rules are. And you tend to like, I think I have a bit of like, even to this day, like kind of a leftover chameleon type people pleaser type personality where I'm always like, what are the rules here? How should I talk? How should I dress? How should I act? How should I laugh? And I want to know what the rules are so that I can fit in and not be noticed and not be singled out. So that's something that I've had to work pretty hard on actually, like in my adult life, to be more in touch with who I am, whether like despite whatever environment I'm in, to be like, okay, what do you want right now? And what matters to you, and not constantly be looking outward to other people.
Yeah. Well, that's a really great segue for us to go into this next question I have in terms of, so you had mentioned your early childhood, and then you had mentioned how, you found your tribe at TAS. Then you decided to pursue a career in the entertainment industry at a very young age. But when you just talked about people pleasing, right, and being in the entertainment industry, so, that seems like another add-on layer to what you were, right, dealing with in your early childhood years, having to enter an industry at a very young age with many, other professionals in the field and, before you that are there. And how did you manage and maneuver in that scene. And
That's
to and you know, and to be able to find yourself and have the right people around you. You know, in previous episodes, a lot of people talked about, you know, your community, right? So whether it's your family, it's your friends, or finding ways for yourself to be grounded in any situation that you encounter, right? And so some people, it might be meditation, some people, it might be yoga, you know, or whatever it is for you. Everyone's different. So yeah, I think we can kind of go into that a little bit more.
Wow, I think that's a really good observation. Like, actually, that's something that I didn't figure out until like years of therapy later, you know, where like basically I had a very unstable childhood in that I was constantly having the rules switched on me and being thrown into different environments and trying to figure out how to survive in them. And my coping mechanism was to adjust and to change myself in order to fit in. And so it was like I did that for many years. And then I got to TAS and I was kind of like, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. I can kind of just work on being myself. And I'm starting to figure this out. And then all of a sudden, oh, I'm back in that world again of trying to fit in, except the stakes are so much higher this time because it's not just, you know, it's not just the school environment. It's a working professional environment. There are people that are investing large amounts of money into what you're doing. There's a lot more competition. And I think that was something that I really struggled with. For example, one of the reasons actually that I was placed into Nan Quan Mama, it was a conscious decision by my management company to help everyone forget that I was of mixed ethnicity because they were worried that, you know, being like having like a foreign face, like more American European features would make me impersonable, I guess. And so they were like, okay, let's just put her in this band with 3 other guys and then everyone will forget that, you know, she's from the States and everyone will just think she's Taiwanese. And it kind of worked, you know, and they even went so far as to like they dyed my hair black and I had to wear black contacts to look more Asian. And it was kind of hard on me because it made me feel like, oh, I'm not going to be accepted just the way that I am. I have to be different. And there were definitely, you know, conversations that I had with my first manager where she was like, okay, well, in Asian culture, especially, girls shouldn't be too loud, I guess. And so, you know, like when you're responding to reporters and interviews and things like that, just smile and don't talk as much, you know, because like we want people to like you. And I'd be like, okay, that's confusing. That's like very different from the kind of education that I've been receiving, or like certain things about how I dressed or how I walked even, or like, you know, there's just so many details that were changed that made me really doubt. And one of the biggest things that I struggled with actually was like the whole Asian beauty aesthetic of girls having to be extremely thin. And that didn't come naturally to me, you know? So I really, really struggled with it. I ended up developing an eating disorder, and then it spent years trying to get a hold on this eating disorder. In a way now, looking back, I can say there are parts of the experience that I'm thankful for, in the sense that if it hadn't been for this eating disorder, I don't think I would have I don't think I would have wanted to learn so much about mental health, because I really, you know, people don't learn until they really have to, until they're really struggling. And then they're like, okay, let me try and figure out what's happening. Let me try and feel better, you know? So in that respect, I think it led to a good thing ultimately, but definitely there were a lot of things that I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to say, no, I don't want to lose weight, or I want to finish eating that sandwich. Don't take it away from me, you know, or like, I'm not comfortable with what you guys are asking of me. And all of these things, I think, ultimately led to a pretty serious depression at the time, which was very confusing for other people that were viewing, you know, my life. They're like, well, you know, how could this, why are you depressed? You know, you're 17 and your band's album is doing well and your whole life is ahead of you. And some people never get this opportunity. And all I could think about was like how I had made a mistake and I didn't like where I was.
I am curious when you were, so everything you just illustrated there at that time, I know you were very close with your sister and your mom, and so were they kind of your support network at the time, or were they also kind of, saying what you just said earlier, like, this is a great opportunity, like, why are you not, accepting what you're presented with and, make the best out of it, I mean, and I say this, and it's not to be negative, because family members all love us, even though sometimes they say things that you're just like, but I just want you to agree with me and support me. Why, I know I am grateful. I'm so grateful I have this really amazing opportunity. Jay at that time was pretty much at his peak in his career too, right? So to be affiliated with that is like super amazing. But knowing deep down, like, that's not who you want to be or where you want to be, and kind of having that internal struggle. I'm just curious did you have an outlet to handle or deal with that,
I think for many years I didn't. And I didn't even really let my family know how much I was struggling. So I'm really lucky in the sense that my mom was always super supportive of anything that I wanted to do. And actually, she was more hesitant than anything about me entering the industry. So she wasn't, like pushing me to be like, oh, this is great, you should do it. And like thinking about all the opportunities that it would lead to. She was more wary. She was like supportive in a wary way where she was like, okay, this is what you want to do, then let's try it. But if you ever decide that, you want to go to college or because that is something that I had to sacrifice. Like I wasn't able to leave Taiwan at the time. And so I wasn't able to attend college like many of my friends. I basically lost my whole friend group overnight when everyone flew off to college. But my mom was always very cautious. And so I knew that if things got really bad, she would, help me find a way out, so to speak. And my sister, because, she was a psych major, she was even more on top of mental health than I was. Like she was actually the first person to quote unquote, like diagnose me. Like she was like, I'm pretty sure you have an eating disorder. You should probably get treatment and all of this stuff. And I think if I hadn't had these people in my life, like it would have been so much more difficult. And I'm really thankful that they always, they were always able to give me perspective that the industry is not end all be all, which is easy to forget. When you're in it, it's so easy to suddenly think that the only things that matter are how many fans you have on your fan page, or, how well your song did on the charts, and which award ceremony you got to attend, and whether, you got any awards. And it just becomes your whole identity. And so I think it's really important, no matter what you do, to have that support group with perspective and be able to call you out even sometimes. Like I remember I would get really weird. Like for a period of time, I was really uncomfortable going outside. And because I was really afraid of people recognizing me. And the root of that was because I was scared that if they recognized me and then they saw me, they'd be like, oh my God, she's so fat. Like it was like irrational thinking at that point. But I was like so scared of that happening that I would get really upset with my mom if we were out in public and she used my name. And she was like, Lara, come here for a second or whatever. And I'd be like, don't use that. And then my sister, who is, she has more of an attitude, she was like, what? Your name? What am I supposed to call you then? And it gave me perspective to be like, oh yeah, like who do I think I am? Like, why am I putting this negativity onto my family or certain things? Like, for example, at the time I was like an idol, so to speak, right? And so there were a lot of rules that my company would pass on to me. Like, for example, like, oh, when you go out in public, like don't hold plastic bags because it looks bad or whatever, like don't hold food, that kind of thing. One time I was at a press conference and my PR person was walking in front of me and he had like a paper bag full of stuff. And the paper bag broke from the bottom and all the stuff fell out, So like naturally I was behind him. So I started like bending over to pick up the stuff. And he was just like, don't leave it. Keep walking. And he was like, it was so intense that it scared me, and it made me think like, oh, I can't pick stuff up anymore. I'm not a normal person, So like there was this other time when I went to Subway with my sister to buy sandwiches. And at the moment when, all the sandwiches were ready and we were about to leave, she got a phone call. So she stepped outside to take the call. And I remember looking at the sandwiches and the counter and like panicking and being like, what do I do? What do I do? I can't hold the bag. I'm not allowed to hold bags. And then so I grabbed the bag and I went outside and I yelled at her and I was like, it's all your fault. How could you just leave me with that bag? Like I had to hold the food. And my sister was just so perplexed and like genuinely bewildered, for lack of a better word. It was just like, who do you think you are? And now when I think back on it, I'm also like, who did I think I was? But that happens, when you're in that environment and everybody is telling you that that is normal and you forget what your own normal is, which is why, like, again, like I know so many people at our age have been, soul searching and trying to figure out like who they really are. But it's so important. It's so important to know what you stand for and what is important to you so that no matter what environment you're in, you don't get confused about things like holding bags.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now I know to not let you hold bags. No, I'm just kidding.
But thankfully, I've moved past that. I can hold bags very comfortably these days.
It's actually a trend now, right? Like holding tote bag. We're being environmentally friendly now. So it's
right. Nowadays, you don't want to hold plastic bags for a different reason. You better hope that it's a recyclable one.
Right. Exactly. So I did want to ask, would it be fair to say that during this time of your early career in the entertainment industry and realizing these things of, you're not being your true self and you're living a life that is, being packaged for you, so to speak, that you did hit a tipping point where you were like, maybe it was a breakdown or whatever that tipping point was for you to decide you're done with being in this industry. I mean, you're technically still in the industry, but I guess like being associated with a label, and you pivoted to becoming an independent artist, right? Was that part of that transition, or what was the root of you deciding to move away from labels, take a break? And I guess taking a break for artists, sometimes it's like you said earlier, it's like, oh my God, that's it. Like I'm no longer relevant anymore. And people are confused and having to figure out who you are, what you want to do. Maybe you wanted to go back to school. Maybe you wanted to pursue that writing career. How did you kind of take that lesson that you learned at the time of really finding who you are as an individual to pursuing further what you wanted to do, with your talents?
To be honest, I think it was a series of events, obviously. The first big one was basically like I did eventually reach a point where I was so wrapped up in my eating disorder that I wasn't functional. So I would lose weight and, run for 2 hours on a treadmill a day. And like my sister would be back in town from college and she'd be like, hey, let's hang out. I'd be like, I can't, I'm treadmilling, it's just like, and then I would gain weight for some reason and then panic. And then because of that, I would spiral and then just keep gaining weight. And I would like lock myself up. Like I mentioned, I wouldn't want anyone to see me. So I'd be like, oh, I can't go to the dentist because the dentist is going to know that I gained weight. And like, it just got to the point where I went to the States for a music program. And then during that process, I gained weight. And when I went back to Taiwan to go on tour, I was so uncomfortable with everyone commenting on like, oh, I think you've put on a bit of weight or whatever, like I started to have panic attacks. And so I knew that I needed to sort it out. So I took my sister's advice and I went and got treatment for my eating disorder. At the time, there wasn't really anything in Taiwan that was really able to provide a sort of treatment program. So I did end up going to the US, and that was the beginning of like, trying to figure out like, oh, maybe a lot of these things that I'm acting out on, like, I'm trying to stuff my feelings down with food, or like I'm trying to associate my weight with my identity. Like that was the first time I realized like it wasn't just so simple as like, oh, I need to lose weight, so I'm going to diet, and like I can't diet, and that's why like I failed as an artist. Like I realized there was so much more. There were so many more emotional reasons behind what was causing and perpetuating the eating disorder. And so that was my first exposure to therapy as well. And the whole idea of like, really getting in touch with your emotions and thinking for yourself and figuring out like what matters to you. And I think, so when I came back from that, it was also, I'd also finished with the band and I started my solo career. So I was still with my label, but I started to have a little more perspective. Like I told my label, like, okay, I'm not going to diet anymore. And I'd appreciate it if you guys like stop telling me to lose weight. Like I'm going to be whatever weight I'm going to be. And I hope you guys can just accept that, And so that was the beginning of like a lot of different things. I did 2 solo albums with them. And then when my contract was up, I'd been with this company, the same group of people for 10 years. And I kind of thought to myself like, oh, I wonder if there's anything else out there, like I'm curious. And at the time, my sister had gotten back from college and, she's full of great ideas. She's like a visionary type personality. And so she was like, let's start our own company. And I was like, okay, let's try it. And so I feel like I almost kind of fell into that, but it was a very rewarding experience. It was hard to have our own company from day one, everything, like thinking of the name, like where to print business cards, like what do you put on your business card, like everything, to the point where in the end, it all culminated, I think, with our biggest project, which was, you mentioned Tomorrow's Star. It was 8 new songs that were an album, but they were also seamlessly linked in a full-length movie. So that was, our ultimate project. It really tested us. It was really hard to, finish an entire album independently and produce a movie and figure out how to like, release a movie, all of that stuff. I think it took a lot out of us as well. And so I think, part of me feels like it was a really important growing experience, but it also made me realize that difficult thing to do. And I learned a lot from it. And I think I also kind of felt like after I did this album, like everything that I had wanted to say or do, I'd done, kind of like that. And so it's interesting that you mentioned like, you were saying like, oh, of course you're still in the industry. And I am, but in a way I'm not, because in my mind, sometimes I do feel like I've retired in the sense that I'm not chasing after anything anymore. Like I'm still happy to be a part of projects. I actually just released another album and I had a lot of fun doing this album. I think it's a great album. It's mostly focused on ballads, and I think it's a great album for people that like Mandopop ballads. But I guess like there was something about that last project with my sister that like it was the last project for my ego, so to speak. Like I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm finished. Like everything Lara as an artist wanted to do, like we're good. And now I'm just kind of like chilling, like in the sense where I do like to work and I like to be a part of many different things, but there's no striving in it anymore. Like I want to do a good job and I'm going to get whatever I need to do done. And then I move on to the next thing. But there's no like, I need this to succeed. I really want this to do well. And I kind of like that actually. Like being in this industry still, but not being so invested in my own fame, so to speak. So it's interesting. I'm still trying to figure out how to explain it. So I haven't done a very good job.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. I think, where we started with the conversation and what we've covered thus far, really has kind of come full circle into where you are now, right? Which is what you just said, because I guess we also didn't really mention that in Tomorrow's Start, you wrote most of the songs, right?
I did. I don't know if I wrote most of them. I was involved in all of them. I wrote most of the lyrics, I think, and then some of the melodies. Yeah.
Which, again, going back to what he had originally said, if, your first career idea was to be a writer. And so, I think this is beautifully coming together. And maybe you haven't really thought about this before our conversation yet, but you're actually kind of doing what you ultimately really wanted to do too, which is writing, but you're doing it in music form, right?
Yeah.
It complements with your beautiful voice. And it's really about the lyrics, and it's also writing. I mean, you can write for others as well, which I'm not sure if you have, but you could, right? And you could do Chinese or English. So anyone listening out there, if you need someone to write songs for you,
I am for hire. That's right. Just, leave me a message on my Instagram or something like that.
Right. Well, but it's true. I should have asked you to do the jingles for me for Curito.
Did you get them done already? Yeah. Okay.
I did, but maybe for my next podcast, if there's ever one. So I do think that we've kind of come full circle with your whole journey, right? You've talked about your challenges and how they've shaped you, and then where you are now. And I do really feel that, over the years, just watching you go through everything, and as a friend, very proud of you as well. It's never easy to go through these different things. We didn't talk about this, but also your mom had passed away during that time as well. So it's just one thing after the other. It's almost felt like a never-ending marathon. So I think, you and Esther and your other sister as well, like you guys really pulled through together, and each in its own, had to sort out different things. And, now, of course, you look back, it was like, it's finally all kind of done. Like you kind of gone through it. All of you probably have gone through your own healing process as well. So before we wrap up, because we're kind of short on time here, but I do want to say that I do think you can really pursue this writing career, because I think you have a lot to share. I think you can also write a book.
Wow. Thank you.
And it doesn't have to be from an entertainment or entertainer angle. It could also just be, all these little different topics you had addressed, whether it's eating disorder, whether it's finding identity, finding self, right? So it's just kind of how you want to package it. Curito is happy to help consult on the side. No, I'm just kidding.
Very
but
nice.
just an idea for you. I think that would be really, really fun. I will obviously put all your links. So Facebook, Instagram for people to follow you, your Spotify so people can listen to your latest album, which I personally have been playing on repeat in the background. Just like you said, it's a very easy to listen to Mando ballad.
Yeah, if you like Mando ballads, this is the album for you.
For English speakers who are listening who don't know you so well, I think it'd be fun to follow you and understand a little bit more about the music industry in Taiwan. I also want to ask you one last question before we say goodbye and good night. Is what advice would you give to people who are either, who are listening, who really relate to what you've been saying, whether they themselves are an entertainer or, in this day and age, I feel like it's maybe even influencers, right? Because that's influencers or KOLs, people who are putting themselves out there for work, for the line of work they do, or people who are struggling with eating disorders.
It's a tough question. I would say go back to basics, which is trust yourself.
you know what you want and what's good for you more than you think. Like, we find so many ways to numb ourselves, distract ourselves, when actually we know the answers. We know what feels right, what feels good. We know what doesn't. And sometimes when we know we don't like something, but we feel powerless to change it, we end up, like I said, distracting ourselves, numbing ourselves, using all these different ways to cope with the truth. And I think the truth has a lot of power. So it's a little bit abstract, but just start with little things. Like, if you don't know what you want, start with what you don't want. Like, if you don't know what you want to eat for lunch, start with what you don't want to eat for lunch, and go from there. And I think it's a difficult journey that everybody has to make, and it's definitely worth it. So that's what I would do.
Well, that's really helpful. I mean, it's also, good to know that there's always light at the end of the tunnel. But sometimes the tunnel might be a little bit longer than some.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't forget that there really is, like, there have been so many times in my life when I've just been like, I feel so unhappy. This is unbearable. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore, which is, another conversation we can have. But there have been so many times when I've looked back and been like, that was so silly that I thought that I really thought like that was it, like life has so much to offer. There's so many surprises, so many things that you can't even imagine just waiting for you around the corner. So just keep going,
All right. So we will end here. And I don't know, maybe when you come back from your time in China, maybe we can do something fun together for our Curito audience as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Let's come up with something creative, but we'll think about it.
Remember a long time ago when I said I wanted to do like a mingling event where like everybody could find like people to date, because I was desperately hoping to find someone to date. But maybe we could do something like that, or something more meaningful.
Sure. We can do something like that for me, right? No. Yes, I will. Okay, we'll brainstorm a little bit more on that. But for now, we're going to wrap up here. Thank you so much for your time. That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to Curito Connects. For more Connects content, collaborations, and discoveries set to inspire you on your own individual journey, please head to our website at www.curito.co. Until next time, stay inspired, and thank you for joining us at Curito Connects.